Welcome to Emergency Fixes in the Age of COVID. Thank you for joining us today. You have Lucas Dixon, myself, from PlugSmart, and Matt McMillan from PlugSmart.
Hello.
Matt?
Hello.
Right. I am Lucas Dixon. I'm the Controls Business Unit Leader of PlugSmart, and I will be the moderator for this conversation. Matt is one of our senior automation engineers and overall automation guru with a lot of experience in helping schools all across the state of Ohio save energy and address indoor air quality. This presentation is going to be structured in a way, because this is pre-recorded, that as you view it, you can submit questions to the chat, and then at the end of this, we will be able to answer them. Our first part of our agenda is a follow-up for facilities on precautions and measures that may have been taken this summer and how that now needs to change or areas to be concerned about as we go into the cold season and when we have a risk of freezing mechanical and hydronic systems. So we're going to start there in terms of adapting our COVID HVAC strategies for the winter. We're also going to review our take on UV and ionization options, what we're seeing, questions from school districts, and what our recommendations are. And then we're going to talk about how to think about emergency repairs in the time of COVID and things that we have seen from a best practices, ways to contract that help in the age of COVID, and some funding ideas that we have seen other districts use in these strange times. So we have helped multiple districts avoid the 3 C's of COVID. So we know that we've got people spaced out. We know that we have tried to ventilate the best ways that our system can allow, and obviously we have had to change the way we gather in crowds. As a reminder of the things that we have recommended, or the things that you as a facility manager have probably already done, is that a goal and a recommendation from the CDC and ASHRAE has been to maximize the amount of outdoor air that our buildings are bringing in. And this works great in the fall. It was a little bit challenging in the summer when we were bringing in a lot of hot outdoor or hot and potentially moist air, and putting our HVAC cooling systems on a stress test. We had to adapt our control schemes and what we were doing there. But now that we're coming into the winter and approaching December and January and February, when we're going to receive our coldest temperatures, we really need to make sure we're protecting our infrastructure in a different kind of way. So we've made changes. We've worked to bring in as much outdoor air as possible, but now we really have to take the approach of do no harm to our mechanical systems. We got to make sure that we are protected and not creating more problems as we try to maintain as much outdoor air as possible. So with that, we want to do a review. We're recommending and working with our customers to go through and check your mechanical systems for areas of risk. What did we do this summer to prepare for the return of students? And is what we did putting our equipment at risk? Things like, did we put our outdoor air dampers in manual at 100% open? With our outdoor air dampers being pretty much open 100% of the time, are those actuators still working? they may not have been exercised or open and closed in several months. Did we potentially go and prop open or mechanically lock out or lock open any of our actuators to maximize the outdoor air? Did we do anything out of the normal this last year that is bringing in more outdoor air or exhausting more outdoor air? And did we put any of those into a condition that now that we're coming into winter has put at risk our building of bringing in untempered air in high quantities? We also still have to make sure that we remember to do our major equipment checks. So have we, with all the additional responsibilities that have been put on our facilities managers, it's hard to just get done the normal things that we always do going into winter. Have we been able to fire our boilers, run the lead lag of our boilers? Did we go through the proper shutdown of our chilled water systems? Did we make sure that we have drained our cooling towers? Have we drained any exposed piping that we have to do for our cooling systems on water-cooled chillers, et cetera? Are there any just normal preparations for winter that we haven't gotten done just because of all the other work that COVID has put on the facility staff? It's also a good time to go through and stress test our freeze stats, either manually going and triggering them with cans of compressed air, or going through and just making sure that none of them are already tripped and we just missed it in our building automation system.
If I could add something in here, Lucas, is so not just stress testing or testing the operation of the freeze stats, but also being cognizant of anything that you've done in the past with nuisance freeze strat trips, and have you taken measures in previous winters to avoid that, and what's the impact of that on how much fresh air you can be bringing in, and are we going to have to look at things like stratification and that to address any issues that would prohibit you from bringing in additional outside air?
That's a really good point. This condition is going to amplify any weaknesses in your system. So if there are any things that you have bypassed or units that have had frozen coils in the past, kind of on a fluke, really cold day, or kind of in the polar vortex year. If we think back to the polar vortex year, did we have any units that froze there and then we kind of just chalked it up to an anomalous condition? If we now consider that we are trying to intentionally maximize outdoor air, those are the units we want to go make sure we spend extra time looking at. Is the way this thing ducted, as you said, Matt, on stratification, is there just some weird mixing that occurs in this this unit that we wouldn't normally expect? When we're bringing in more outdoor air, we also want to think about the sequences of how these units start up. Often freeze stats get tripped right upon startup because the coil hasn't heated up enough. Maybe otherwise you're not bringing in the warm air on your return side has cooled down, and it's not really pulling the warmest air from the space. So you get that situation where a unit kicks on and then immediately trips on the freeze stat. So just thinking about all of those units in your building, those one or two that have historically been a challenge and have had repeated freeze stats, it's time to go back and look at those units in particular. That's a really good point. We've also seen in building facilities managers, the areas of risk in your building that where you've had either domestic water piping freeze or you've had fire suppression systems. If you have a water-based system, that those have frozen. Consider that if you're bringing in more outdoor air and you are risking having colder air in your plenums or in your boiler rooms or other spaces, that those areas that have experienced freezing in the past or you know are concerns, it's just going to amplify those risks. So pay special attention. Maybe it makes sense to add freeze tape or heat trace tape to these units or these areas preemptively to prevent an issue. And then Matt, you brought up some really important points about how we also should look at our heating water set points. So why don't you talk a little bit more about that?
So the traditional reset schedule for heating water systems is relative to either space load and or outside air temperatures, but this assumes you're at design ventilation conditions. This winter, in response to COVID, your systems are going to be asked to exceed their normal design ventilation parameters. Therefore, it may be time to look at your reset schedules and analyze whether you need to actually raise those reset schedules so that hotter hot water is available. Also important, because especially in the Midwest and the winters we have with the potential of freezing, that your hot water system has been pre-tested, things you would normally do seasonally to make sure the lead lag, failover sequences, alarm annunciation, those sort of things are tested so that your system will respond appropriately if there's a failure of some sort.
Yes, on that annunciation part, it's a really good time to check to make sure that your building automation system has outbound alarms for pump, boiler, and freeze-stat trips, that they're being sent out, either text-based if your system allows that, or email, or if your system does not allow that, how are you going to have a practice of going in and checking your alarms at a more frequent basis, especially as we're coming into the cold this period of the year. When we get the first 10-degree night or sub-zero night, when we're really going to expose those weaknesses, setting up with your team a protocol where people are checking in several times that night into the system. And you just do the things, be especially vigilant, because you'd set yourself up to potentially expose things that haven't happened in the past. I think overall, how we're thinking about this is that with more outdoor air coming into your building, there's less room for error. So if you have limped along with one hot water pump for a couple of years, just haven't gotten around or haven't gotten it funded for fixing that hot water pump, that secondary pump, now's the year to get it fixed so that you have that fail safe. Go through and manually shut off your lead pump. Make sure and watch the secondary pump come on. Things like that are best practices you want to do before you find out that that sequence isn't working for some reason. Anything else on a good winter review, Matt?
Things like damper seals, placement, freestat placement. Are your sensors, things like mixed air sensors, are they placed correctly to actually give you a good idea of what the mixed air temperature is doing? Those sort of things.
Yeah, good point. Getting your eyes on your freestat, make sure that the sensor has not come detached from the coil and fallen down at the bottom of the unit.
Right. Yeah.
Looking to make sure you don't have one. You've had your damper open for several months, making sure that it hasn't come loose. Your linkages are well lubricated and that you're able to close that damper as the unit works to protect itself.
I mean, the bottom line is although modulating down outside air to protect, from a freestat trip will reduce outside airflow, a tripped unit delivers no outside air. So it's better to make sure this stuff works before it becomes an issue where it's not running at all. The last thing anybody wants to do is to be cleaning up after a frozen coil.
Amen. Okay, so now we are seeing more and more schools consider putting in additional technology to purify their air in some way. The two most common requests that we're getting are for ultraviolet light and bipolar ionization. So just a quick review of how we see these technologies being applied, how we think about them, and some recommendations. So both of these technologies have been used widely, primarily in hospitals or other critical care environments. So putting them in schools is relatively new. There are some schools that have had these in, and depending on climate and where you have more fungal activity, things like that, things that you get farther south, there's been more use of things like ultraviolet light. Traditionally, ultraviolet has been used to make sure that the unit, the air handling unit or rooftop unit, is not a source of growth for bacteria or fungus, mold, things like that. So you can imagine that a drip pan in a air handler could be a good place, a moist place for things to grow, and then your air handler is a pretty good distribution of that growth throughout your building. So having a UV light that is shining on that drip pan has been a tried and true way to prevent that from happening, and in critical care environments, that has been done widely. UV light has been used less to actually try to kill things in the airstream as the air passes through that, and that you're trying to kill airborne viruses, in this case, pathogens, yes. So while it can do it, the application requires a lot more technology, more UV lights at a greater intensity to be able to do that and expose the pathogens as they move through the unit. So it's hard to use UV and make sure that you are covering your entire airstream with enough intensity to have it be effective. So it is a difficult thing to do. They do work, they do kill things, and they are quite potent. One of the things that we are concerned about is that if you apply this technology in the wrong location or for a unit that is not built for UV lights, you can actually do a lot of long-term damage to that unit. UV light will damage and degrade rubber gaskets, canvas connections, and any plastic within the unit. So you can actually do a lot of damage to the vibration control within a unit, the mounting brackets, the connections that hold up your sensors throughout your rooftop unit or air handler, the canvas connectors between your unit and the ducting throughout that then travels throughout the building. All this stuff needs to be carefully considered. You have to have an area that is able to contain that UV light and not damage the unit, or you'll put these units in and then you'll be forever having a lot of increased maintenance on that unit. Anything else, Matt, you'd like to add to that about UV light?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. The last item there, the filters will require a film applied or filters designed for UV applications. So that, I mean, part of the things we talked about in the original version of this was the importance of filtering. So you could, UV, if you're not really designing for it, could degrade the very filters we used over the summer to try to help with this issue.
Yeah. So UV light is a proven technology. It kills things, kills pathogens. It hasn't historically been used to kill pathogens in the airstream in the way that we see districts looking to apply it now. And there's risks with UV light in terms of how it can affect the equipment. So it works, but it needs to be treated with a lot of respect. Bipolar ionization is another technology that we are getting a lot of requests for. It has a better application for working to treat the airstream. It's better suited to that, and it has less risk, not no risk, but less risk to the equipment that it's being applied to. It does have, it is also hard, though, to apply enough technology to get the intensity that is needed to treat an entire airstream. So it does not the perfect solution, and it does have maintenance requirements that need to be considered. But because an air handler or rooftop unit is moving air and by nature going to mix that air up as it delivers it to the spaces, there's just some benefit to how this is going to work, and it to us seems the better technology to apply. Our recommendation is that if districts are going to do one of these things, ionization or UV light, that they look really hard at ionization, because we think the technology is a better application for what is trying to be accomplished.
Well, one thing on that previous slide I'd note, so it's important to look at when selecting ionization systems about the ozone emission associated with them. So ozone will accelerate corrosion. It's also harmful to your health depending on the levels. So it's important to both understand what the manufacturer's data is and what the unit manufacturers, say air handler manufacturers and health department officials say about levels of ozone relative to, safe applicable levels. So that's a key point to look at these ionization systems.
Yes, really good point. I think for either system, it's really important to make sure you're dealing with a professional that has experience in installing these systems. There's a lot of demand right now, and there's a lot of folks that are saying they can do this and ordering stuff off the internet and installing it. I just want to caution that this is serious equipment. It can do damage. It can actually be a risk to your equipment and to your health if you don't treat it with respect and you're not working with people that understand how to install it. So buyer beware on these systems. On both of them, we do want to say that they will require additional maintenance, and monitoring those systems, we'll get to just a minute, is a crucial way to make sure that the investment is and the benefits of the investment is permanent. So in summary, our recommendation when looking at UV lighting and bipolar ionization is the first thing you have to do is you've got to make sure your mechanical systems are operating correctly. Are your air handlers and rooftop units operating properly? Have you already done everything you can to maximize the amount of outdoor air you are bringing in? So the solution to pollution is dilution, as the saying goes. The first way and first defense for COVID-19 is to bring in more outdoor air and exhaust more indoor air. Once you have done that, then we recommend you look for a proxy monitor. So there is not a sensor that can detect COVID-19 in the air, but using indoor air quality monitoring sensors, VOC sensors, CO2 sensors, you can use that as a proxy for how much outdoor air exchanges you're achieving.
Whether your ventilation is adequate and it's actually ventilating the way you anticipated.
That's exactly right. So if you can monitor that and make sure that your system is doing everything it can and should first, and document that with some sort of monitoring technology, now it's our opinion that you've done everything you can with your base equipment. If you want to do more, we recommend ionization over UV lighting, primarily because it has less risk of damaging your equipment and there's more documentation that it's effective treating the airstream. And then finally, whatever you install, it's going to require additional maintenance. And you should consider figuring out if you can put alarming on the system so that if there is a failure, you get notified and can go address it quickly. If not, you're going to spend all your time running around seeing if your UV lights, how many bulbs you've lost on your UV side, or if there's a issue with your bipolar ionization system, and it's spread out across the building. And with everything else you have to do in your job before COVID, we want to make sure you're not setting yourself up for a system that's really difficult to maintain.
I would add that so modern systems, and maybe if you don't have a modern system, consider some sort of loggers or something to see what the impacts to comfort are by the changes you've put into effect. So obviously we don't want to freeze your buildings, right? We brought in all this outside air and it's great, everything's ventilated, but we're 55 degrees in the space. So we need to make sure that you take advantage of the features of your BAS system to monitor that and make real-time adjustments in as short a time as possible to meet the demands of both ventilation rates and comfort.
That's right. Still have to be comfortable in your buildings, or having people back will not go well. All right. So now on to a couple best practices and some thoughts on making emergency repairs. So we've all had a crazy year, a lot of new requirements on our jobs as maintenance professionals, but our buildings continue to age. They continue to experience failures, and now they do so in an environment of a lot more uncertainty. So how do we think about this? Well, as a maintenance professional, how do we take these problems and present them to our teams, to our administration, to our boards of education? Number one is we've seen a lot of savvy facilities folks use this as an opportunity to take a bite out of deferred maintenance. So the opportunity to use things like CARES funding to both improve indoor air quality and also make meaningful facilities improvements is real, and you can certainly document the fact that replacing and repairing failed air handling equipment is an improvement to your indoor air quality. Upgrading control systems and adding to existing building automation systems with additional sensor technology both meets indoor air quality improvement. It can improve the operation of the building. Generally, it can also be used to save energy. So you can do things that are going to put you further ahead in the long run versus just spend the CARES money on more face masks and hand sanitizer. As important as both of those things are, there are also things and ways to use this funding, if you're lucky enough to have it and have excess of it, in ways that improve your facilities' deferred maintenance in a meaningful way. You can use the safety narrative to further your and increase the importance in the eyes of your administration and your board to get things that you have known need done for a long time, but you've been hitting your head up against the brick wall here in terms of getting funding and increasing the understanding of importance. Now that everyone's attention is on indoor air quality, you can use this time as a way to get that stuff done. How do you get it done in a time of a pandemic? Contracting, things that used to be very simple or at least not impossible now seem just really difficult. Getting a whole bunch of contractors through your building to do a site walk seems like a lot of work, and it can be a lot of work to meet all the COVID protocols, get everybody in and out in a safe manner, on top of everything else you're now required to do in your daily job. So there are contracting options that were built for emergencies, things like urgent necessity, where you have the ability to make decisions on who you use in an emergency to get things done quickly. A pandemic is a good, can't think of a time that urgent necessity was better suited for than a pandemic. You can also use things like purchasing consortiums. There are pre-RFQ'd and RFP'd vendors that have been selected as part of these purchasing consortiums. TIPS, for example, is one that we use a lot that can shorten the time it takes to run through your purchasing process. Then, of course, all your traditional means of purchasing and competitive bidding are available, but we've seen some best practices in holding those walkthroughs and getting people through buildings to provide quotes, and share a couple of those. So taking advantage of flexible schedules. So there are times right now that the COVID has allowed things to be a lot easier. If students aren't in the building, you can get folks through during normal time. You can get work done in normal time. In other situations where you have multiple trades working in your building, you may need to stagger the shifts. So you have people coming in during the day and then coming in second shift, so that you don't have so many people working in the same area to meet your COVID protocol. So there's just a lot of additional planning and things to think through on how you maintain your site's COVID protocols, but also get construction and maintenance work done. We've seen districts use video technology to document conditions so that you can have shorter or less site visits. Some contractors may take that video and pictures that you provide and just be able to put bids or estimates together off of those. You can also use Zoom to do your pre-project review and scope of work, where you have all your contractors come in, generally in a conference room before a site walk, where you tell everybody the same thing. A very important part of a a bid process where everybody hears it from you or from your architect or engineer, and here's the same thing. Well, you can do that part of the construction process on Zoom, and then have a walkthrough that you schedule later with either individual contractors or a group, but you can just shorten the amount of time you have people on site. It's really important that you are clear with your contractors of what the COVID protocols are going to be for their project. So you don't set yourself up for unavoided upcharges for things like having to work second shift or having to have additional check-in times at your site, things like that, things that may increase the cost of a project or increase likelihood of a change order later. Just be very clear in writing what the COVID protocols for that site are going to be so that there's no surprises later. Now, funding. So what can you do in this time of uncertainty to get projects funded? One thing we've seen gain in popularity in the time of COVID is a lease purchase. So a lease purchase, and these methods may be outside of your purview. It may not be you that has to figure out these funding solutions, but I think as facilities professionals, going to your administration, to your treasurer, to your superintendent with ideas of the solution and not just a problem can benefit you and the things you're trying to get done. So lease purchase has an advantage here in a time of uncertainty where when you do the lease purchase, you have the ability to have a buyout clause. So you could have a project that maybe you do have the PI funds to do, but you also are pretty nervous as a district on what other expenses you're going to see in the next 2 years because of COVID. Doing a lease purchase where you keep that cash reserve, still get your work done, and then if nothing major comes up, you can just pay off that lease purchase. It's a good way to have your cake and eat it too, in a way where you maintain that cash reserve and also get your work done. We talked about CARES Act funding. While that may be coming to an end on an initial phase, being ready for any additional funding that may come, it's likely that something is going to have to be done for school budgets in the next year. So being ready with ways to effectively spend additional windfalls, quote unquote, of funding that some districts experienced, that just puts you in a position when you have a stack of projects ready to go with your administration that, hey, if you're fighting for that funding with someone else in your district, another priority, if you're ready to go and can show that, yes, we can spend this money by the determined amount of time allowed by that program. We saw a lot of districts have to have this money spent by X date to use it or lose it. Well, they may have had to spend that on something that was easy to purchase and put in stock versus the HVAC project with the 14-week lead time that they really wanted to do, but they weren't certain they were going to be able to get it all done by the requirement. So working now to have those projects fleshed out, anticipating that there might be some other emergency funds coming in 2021 is a good option for you just to be prepared. Energy efficiency financing. We are energy efficiency geeks. We're an energy efficiency firm. So it would, of course, energy efficiency using LED lighting savings or other building automation energy savings to fund in a positive cash flow manner or other HVAC projects. Now that in the age of COVID, those HVAC projects take on a new safety need, and the importance of them is very clear to your administration or to your board. It has basically bumped them up their priority list. So now when you go and take that air handler replacement or rooftop unit replacement to them, that R22 unit that is a pain in the ass to maintain, you may you may now get more attention on that project that you've talked about for the last 5 years, and now might be the time to use energy savings and pairing it up with that to fund that long time known need. All of these things, it benefits you as the facilities administrator to be thinking ahead. So we have seen some districts spend money on a short duration fix when there was potentially ways to spend that address the short term and a long term or permanent improvement need. So whenever we're thinking about this and creating our list and our priority list, how can we tackle more than one need at a time? Things like, okay, I can spend a bunch of money on high MERV filters, and that's great. But if my air handler needs new filter racks as well, or needs, if I'm going to put a bunch of money in repairing this air handler or rooftop unit, what's the cost difference between just replacing the entire unit at this point? And can I pair this with some other creative funding option where I actually I accomplish the indoor air quality need and replace that 25-year-old rooftop unit at the same time? Are there ways to accomplish more than one thing at a time? And that's we've seen savvy facilities folks really be able to make important arguments to their administration of accomplishing more than one thing at a time. It's also important, and we talked about it before, in terms of adding indoor air quality sensors or CO2 sensors, that whenever you're doing any of these improvements, that you're thinking ahead on how I'm going to document that these things are working. So how do I both add these additional measures to the building, but then I can also empower my administration to have a nice report to take to the community and show that, yes, I have improved my indoor air quality in XYZ meaningful way, so that they can take that and put that on the website so that the district can know, yes, my school district is doing everything they can. And with that, I think the last thing, and even looking more long-term, is that how is this pandemic going to affect my long-term facility needs? So if I had a discussion going within my district of potentially replacing or renovating a building, this time of uncertainty, this quote-unquote lost year, how's that going to affect that? Is it going to delay that ballot issue? Are we now worried as a district that we're going to have to put both a operating levy and a facility levy on the ballot at the same time, and that may not be a good idea? So my facilities improvements, instead of getting on the levy in 2021 or 2022, may actually get pushed out to 2024. What does that do to the things that I had been pushing off addressing in my facility? Can I really get another 5 years out of this boiler, or do I need to find another way to solve this problem rather than continuing to put Band-Aids on it? So as we're coming in and adjusting to the new normal, we expect that this uncertainty in this year may delay some of that future planning, unfortunately. And using other funding mechanisms, you may be able to address the most critical items in your building so that you're not setting yourself up for a problem 2 to 3 to 4 years out. Matt, any comments on this?
No. I think there's tons of options out there to be creative with how you do things. I think the key thing is to keep in mind that you can accomplish multiple tasks at the same time, and that a lot of these improvements we're talking about in getting your equipment up to snuff and running properly are a good long-term investment and not just a good COVID investment.
That's right. All right. With that, now is time for Q&A. So we will join this meeting live and answer any questions you've submitted into the chat. So again, thank you for your attention. Thank you for your hard work this year. It has been a doozy. And we, in discussions with customers across the district, just the amount of additional work and chaos that the pandemic has caused has put a tremendous amount of strain on facilities professionals. You're unsung heroes of getting our kids back into school, which is all what we all want. And we really appreciate you.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you for your
and good
time.
luck. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mark, I will assume